Obviously, a huge mistake had been made, and the original list had not been completely vetted. There were close to 1,000 names that on that list. Of course, this caused some major confusion, but thankfully our elections administrator thought twice before immediately sending the letters that the SOS requested be sent, requiring people to prove their eligibility to vote. She and her staff began to go through the list name by name and make sure there were no further mistakes, and I'm glad that they did that, because to date they have found close to another 1,000 names that should not have been on the original list. And ironically, she found one of her own employees who recently had become a naturalized citizen was on that list. If we would have blindly followed Mr. Whitley's instructions, we would have begun the process to possibly disenfranchise at least 2,000 voters in our community, and I would venture to say thousands more. We also would have created a huge liability for the county, as we could have been sued by every individual that we might have disenfranchised. This has caused a huge trust issue for El Paso County with the Secretary of State's office, and it's also causing a huge trust issue with voters. We already have problems with voter turnout, and this will only exacerbate those problems. There's also a monetary impact to our county because of this issue. Our county administrator had to keep a number of temporary personnel on payroll to continue going through the list, and she expects it could take 2 more weeks to finish.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Can I just make one more last comment? Take 2 seconds. I want to make my point. I know it's a very difficult task going through this nominating process, and you all have much to consider, but I ask that you take my testimony into consideration, as well as the hugely irresponsible manner in which Mr. Whitley has acted during his first few months on the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Senator Seliger?
Ms. Prowse, is it your impression or assertion that the communication between the Secretary of State's office was advisory, and that here is this list of people who may not be eligible to vote, or was it more instructive? This is a list of people who should be stricken from the rolls.
The advisory was both informative and instructive. The advisory itself says we're providing actionable information. This is information upon which you should act. This is what a voter challenge letter looks like. Here is the link to that letter. If you believe or have reason to believe that these folks who we've identified as non-citizens could be non-citizens, then you should send the challenge letter. That's why so many counties, Austin, Fayette, Washington, Blanco, also Galveston County, have sent out these letters immediately upon receiving the advisory. I don't think it's right to blame the county elections administrators for responding in the way that they did to the instructions in the advisory.
And so some of these counties immediately sent out the letters before doing what El Paso County did, and then vetting the information they had and finding clearly that some people were exempt from the action that the letters talked about.
That is correct, Senator. The letters are still out there. They're sitting on people's kitchen counters and kitchen tables. U.S. citizens are this very day facing a ticking clock of less than 30 days at this point, 3 weeks, if they've even opened their mail or understood the import of the letter, that their voter registrations will be canceled.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Watson?
I want to follow up on that line of questioning. What Senator Seliger is pointing out is that some counties have approached this in different ways, but that can be a result of resources. That can be a result of how quickly they just want to act on something and get that behind them, because it's not something they do every day. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because some counties have seen these enormous numbers being sent to them, huge purge lists, and stopped and used a modicum of common sense. The advisory itself says that the data that was being compared to DPS was old data, that simply what they were getting was lists of people who immigrated to the U.S. prior to having registered to vote. And there were counties that said, you know what, as a matter of common sense, we need to take a second look at this. Other counties just very reflexively obeyed the instructions in the advisory.
And I asked some questions earlier about the National Voter Registration Act and the fact that it requires uniformity. Do you have any thoughts about whether or not different counties reacting differently, and I'm not suggesting any are doing it right, wrong, or otherwise, but different counties acting differently would result in a lack of uniformity under that act.
Yes, Senator, there are two types of uniformity problems that violate the NVRA in what's going on right now. The first is that county by county, they're responding differently to the information. And even beyond that, some counties are going to have naturalization ceremony information, others will not. This is bad data and a waste of time. The other problem of non-uniformity is that the list was designed specifically to capture voters who are naturalized citizens who immigrated to the U.S. And by targeting only that group of voters through the way the protocol was designed, there is a lack of uniformity as well in checking eligibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions, members, for the panel? I have a hard time seeing your lights, so if I don't want to miss anyone. Commissioner Stout, did your county participate in the training that the Secretary of State's office offered?
I believe so. There was a training that Lisa Weiss participated in January, but she said that there was not any information given or instruction given on how to deal with naturalized people going through the naturalization process. It was just an overview on maintenance.
Thank you. Any further questions, members, for this panel? All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next up, Anthony Gutierrez, Cynthia Weatherby, Nina Brodsky, and Laura Presley. Mr. Gutierrez, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators. My name is Anthony Gutierrez. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause Texas, testifying on behalf of Common Cause in opposition to Secretary Whitley's nomination. Common Cause is a national organization or a nonpartisan group that works on democracy reform issues. In Texas, it's principally voting rights and elections work. And we've been paying very close attention to this, the list maintenance thing that Secretary Whitley has described. I paid very close attention to your questions this morning, and I feel like I got a lot of new details to some of our serious questions, but not a lot of satisfactory answers. I did submit written testimony, and I hope you'll review it. I'll just really quickly run through some of the big questions that I think we still have that are not answered. I don't understand why that list was referred to the Attorney General, this big list that the Secretary had no reason to believe anyone on that list had actually committed a crime. Why was that given to the Attorney General? I thought Senator Watson's suggestion about just referring them, suggesting that they should just not be prosecuting anybody or pursuing any kind of criminal investigation was a good one, which should not even be necessary, but I feel like that should have been something that he should have jumped at instead of saying it's something like, we'll think about. The 10 trainings that were described, I still don't quite understand what happened there because the county officials, I think we all saw media reports where county officials were describing just not really understanding what they were supposed to do or the data they were looking at. They clearly were not brought in on the front end to be consulted on the data or the methodology. That seems like a bit of due diligence that should have been obvious, that these people work with voter rolls every day. They could have pointed out some of these red flags early on in the process and avoided the debacle that happened afterwards. And the decision not to rescind the advisory once it was discovered that it was so wildly inaccurate. I don't understand why there was this insistence that we just had to stick with this advisory. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Weatherby?
Thank you, Chair Buckingham and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to talk today. I am Cynthia Weatherby, testifying as a member and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Texas, and I'm speaking on Mr. Whitley's confirmation. It's really unusual for us to get involved in any political appointments. In the Capitol, we concentrate our legislation efforts on those pertaining to the democratic process. And while we cover a range of topics, our mission of empowering voters and defending democracy overrides all the other issues that we discuss. To pursue that mission, We do all that we can to see that all citizens of the state have the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate in the democratic process. And we were very saddened that the interim Secretary of State chose to participate in actions that pose a risk of undoing our work, particularly registering newly naturalized citizens. And our members register tens of thousands of those each year. And the League celebrates those new citizens' participation in the voting process. So we've also worked very hard to establish a positive relationship with the Secretary of State's office, and we learn from them by participating in their annual 3-day election official training. We work with them to offer clear and factual information to voters throughout the state. As an example, we survey all county websites to be certain that those websites include the office's updated information. And the League also appreciates the staff's leadership in election process security. We want to see an improved and modernized voter registration and elections process that is more accurate and secure. And it seems evident that that should be a priority this session. Our faith in accomplishing that under Mr. Whitley's leadership is diminished.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Brodsky?
Yeah, hi. My name is Nina Brodsky, and I want to thank you for letting me speak. I'm opposed to the nomination of David Whitley for Secretary of State because I believe his actions made citizens fearful to vote, and that should just never be the case. I have a little anecdotal story about a friend of mine who was convicted of a crime 45 years ago, and he fulfilled his sentence but was told he could not vote. Only about 5 years ago, he learned otherwise and registered to vote, and shortly thereafter he was called for jury duty, and during the jury selection, the judge found out he was registered and yelled at him, "You can't vote, and if I find out you do, I will personally make sure you go to jail." And he was terrified. In 2018, I convinced him, and it wasn't easy because he was so scared, that he should go see the Travis County clerk, who assured him that he could vote, and he did. He registered to vote, and in 2018, for the first time at the age of 64, he voted, and he cried. And I just feel like disenfranchisement of voters through fear tactics, whether by error or something more sinister, should never be allowed and be acceptable.
Thank you for your testimony. Dr. Presley?
Thank you, Senator Buckingham, and hello, Senators on the committee. My name is Dr. Laura Presley, and I'm a Travis County Republican Party Precinct Chair, and I am Vice Chair of the Election Integrity Committee here in Travis County, and I'm the founder of True Texas Elections. And I'm here representing Grassroots America, We the People, and their coalition members. While our organization supports Mr. Whitley's appointment to the Secretary of State, we want to highlight opportunities to address some election integrity issues that exist today. Because citizens-initiated investigations continue to reveal escalating evidence of vote counting process weaknesses in our state. And we consider there are rogue actions by Secretary of State employees who routinely ignore or thwart laws by issuing these waivers that Senator Hall mentioned. Texans are demanding that the Secretary of State end these waivers. We believe the new Secretary will take immediate action to end the practice of issuing county-by-county workarounds, waivers that suspend Texas laws. The current practice of waiving these laws violates the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 28. No power of suspending laws in this state shall be exercised except by you guys, the legislature. As we sit here today, waivers are given to several vote-counting laws around the state, and I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to reiterate what Senator Hall said. Zero tapes and results tapes are not printed in Travis and Lubbock counties, but they're printed in Midland and Rockwall counties. Where's the consistency there? Number two, some counties number their ballots. Bell County, who has paper ballots, sequentially number their ballots consistent with the Texas Constitution. Harris County, who has electronic ballots, last time I checked, computers are real good at numbering stuff. They should be able to number their ballots, and the equipment can do it. They're just not doing it. Where's the consistency? We believe that the Secretary Whitley will clean up the SOS office and enact these reforms, and Texans will trust their elections and their votes are being counted. And we encourage and support Mr. Whitley addressing these waivers and cleaning up the office. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? right, seeing none, thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Our next panel, Whitney Peak, Cornelia Foster, Steve Chamberlain, Hilda Guillen Gomez. Ms. Peak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Buckingham and members of the Nominations Committee. My name is Whitney Peak, and I live in Austin, Texas. And I am here as a voter, as a citizen, as a lifelong Texan, to testify against the nomination of David Whitley as Texas Secretary of State. I am very disturbed by Secretary Whitley's advisory report questioning the citizenship status of approximately 100,000 people on our voter rolls. And I don't want to go through the details of the report again, but I agree with the concerns expressed by Nina Perales and Mike Siegel. Since this report targeted many people who are and went on to become U.S. citizens, I couldn't help but think of my role as a volunteer deputy voter registrar for Travis County. It's been a great honor for me to register new citizens to vote, and I remember several of them filling out the forms, always very carefully, smiling big and shaking my hand when it was complete, and sometimes even tears were shed. The sense of pride in the eyes of someone excited for their first election is not one that I will soon forget. They say that you can't choose family, but these targeted people are people who chose the sometimes difficult path of becoming American citizens. So in many ways, they are the best sort of family. They chose Texas as their home. The actions of Secretary Whitley did not just create a bureaucratic nightmare for the counties, but he also punished this hopeful group and replaced that with fear. Because there is a fear associated with getting a notice letter, and it discourages voting, for fear of wrongdoing and for fear of breaking the law, and that is voter suppression, and the damage has been done. So I just wonder, what was this? Was it a display of lack of judgment by Secretary Whitley, or was this a purposeful weaponization of voter data? I'm not sure, but either way, I feel that these actions undermine the integrity of our elections and are disqualifying to serve in the role of Texas Secretary of State, and I urge you all to vote no on his nomination today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Foster?
Hi. I'm Cornelia Adams Foster. Like Dr. Presley, I'm a precinct chair in Travis County. I'm concerned about election integrity issues. I'm also somewhat concerned that the controversy over the press release is going to overshadow some of the issues I really care about, which have to do with the electronic tabulation and some of the issues that Senator Hall raised, and some other people have spoken to, because we have a situation with electronic voting where waivers can be given by the Secretary of State's office, and then there's no forensic audit trail so that anybody could look back if there were any irregularities, and this is a problem with electronic voting. Also, there are situations where tabulation computer machines end up being connected to the internet, and that too is a way for mischief to occur. And so I'm speaking in support of David Whitley, because my hope is that there will be real attention given to following Texas state laws on election integrity that address these issues with electronic voting, and we just need for there not to be waivers going forward. So that's
Thank you for
what
your
I say.
Thank you. Mr. Chamberlain?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senators. My name is Steve Chamberlain. I'm here to speak in opposition of the confirmation of Secretary Whitley. Recently, bogus information was released was released by the Secretary of State for approximately 100,000 non-citizen voters. To me, this was voter intimidation because of the way it was done and without having any information on it or without checking the information. You guys are not intimidated, but as a VDR in Bastrop County, I have spoken with a lot of people that even refuse to register to vote because they are intimidated by the government. As Senator Alvarado said earlier, this was either voter intimidation or gross negligence. I don't know which it is, but whichever, that is not something that should be done by the Secretary of State. And when we lose the right to vote, then we've lost democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Guillen-Gomez?
Yes, thank you, Senator. My name is Hilda Guillen-Gomez. I do live in Austin County. I was appointed Justice of the Peace in Matagorda County. I ran in that county, and then I also in Austin County. The reason that I'm here is because I have had a few friends in Austin County that received these letters. As a Mexican-American, a member of the Sealy community and a former political candidate, I'm in touch with several of the U.S. citizens who have received threatening letters due to Secretary Whitley's voter purge. These are naturalized U.S. citizens who lawfully registered to vote and who are shocked to receive the letter from Austin County that promised to take away their voting rights if they did not take immediate action. Even though these affected community members of U.S. citizens, they are afraid to come forward because of the climate in Texas and in Austin County. Hispanic members of the community are often subject to legal targeting by law enforcement practices and are threatened like we are illegals just because of the color of our skin. I do not think that David Whitley even considered the impact of the action on my community. Because of this, and because he is so inconsiderate, and because of the threatening actions, I do not believe that he is qualified for this seat. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, any questions for this panel?
Thank you all.
All right, seeing none, thank you all so much for coming to your state capitol. Next up, we have Montserrat Garibay, Julietta Garibay, Cecilia Dennis, and a duplicate. So next is Lon Burnham. Sorry, I apologize. We'll start with Montserrat Garibay. If I said that right, I apologize if I messed that up.
Yes, my name is Montserrat Garibay. I'm a National Board Certified Teacher, and I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Texas AFL-CIO. The Texas AFL-CIO is a state labor federation consisting of 235,000 affiliated union members. I sign up to speak today in opposition of the nomination of David Whitley as the Texas Secretary Treasurer. Secretary of State, I'm sorry. Thank you to the committee for taking the time to hear our testimonies. Again, my name is Montserrat Garibay. I am a naturalized citizen for our beloved country. It took me 20 years to apply to become a citizen. Becoming a citizen impacted my life and reinforced my respect and commitment to our democratic values. Naturalized immigrants like myself and my family take the naturalization process very seriously. For the past 5 years, I have decided and devoted my time and efforts to assist eligible permanent residents to apply for the naturalization process through the Texas AFL-CIO citizenship drives. We have assisted over 15,000 permanent residents who were eligible to apply for their citizenship. I have also attended multiple citizenship oath ceremonies for bus drivers, electricians, fast food workers, custodians, teachers, clerks, union members, and even the parents of my students. You see, people that become U.S. citizens take their oaths seriously and are eager to cast their votes. They are excited to be fully embraced by our nation, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We know that voting as permanent residents is a felony. The person that holds the job the Secretary of State serves as the Chief Election Officer for Texas, assisting election officials at the county level and ensuring that the election laws are interpreted fairly and are applied informally through Texas. The fact that Mr. Whitley has been so carelessly by his statements, he has undermined the office and our trust as Texans. I respectfully ask you to oppose his nomination as the Secretary of State. By not investigating furthering and rushing to judgment in his matter, it is clear that Mr. Whitley has damaged our faith in the electoral process. He is not fit for the job for overseeing the state elections.
Next is Lon Burnham. Sorry. Did you pull the other one? There were two, same last name. There, I'm sorry. Julieta Garibay. Sorry, my bad.
It's okay. My name is Julieta Garibay. I'm a U.S. citizen and a Texas registered voter. And I am one of those close to 100,000 people who were wrongly accused of committing voter fraud by the Texas Secretary Whitley, Attorney General Paxton, and Governor Abbott in an attempt to suppress our vote. I renewed my Texas license, in September 2017 with my legal permanent residency card. I took my naturalization oath on April 2018, and I proudly voted on May 2018. As I read the news and claimed, I felt frustrated, outraged, and in shock. When I became a U.S. citizen, I had hoped that maybe now I would live in tranquility and in peace. When the news broke, and I was informed that in fact I was on the list, and Paxton saying that this was criminally prosecuted voter fraud, I questioned myself if I had done something wrong. I questioned, and I got scared. I had to stop myself from letting Whitney or Paxton or Abbott question myself or my right to vote. As a longtime community organizer for almost 15 years, I know that many others receiving an official call or letter questioning if you committed voter fraud will be very overwhelming. I would likely drive many not only to question themselves if they did something wrong, but prevent them from actually going out to vote. Why would they deal and be disrespected this way? The utter disrespect of saying this is a process, there should have been done due diligence of understanding what is the list, where does it come from, who is in it, why, and most importantly, is this a legitimate tool to assess if people are eligible to vote? Something that Mr. Whitley failed to do. Checks and balances should have been done before sending false alarms, sending bogus lists to county registers, sending letters to voters. This is nothing but voter intimidation to people of color and people who are naturalized citizens and foreign born. The checks and balances of what you as elected officials are working for Texans should be done now as you think of confirming this man. Can you truly trust such an important job to someone that hastily and irresponsibly said that we U.S. citizens committed voter fraud? A mi gente, salgamos a votar.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Burnham?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Some of you will recall that I served here in the House of Representatives for 18 years, served 2 sessions on the Elections Committee, and so all the ills of the process that have been mentioned today are familiar to me, discussed in committee hearings in the previous decade. Many of them not addressed because of the appropriators' lack of concern for these issues. But today, I'm here on behalf of Public Citizen, and I'm going to read some comments representing David Jones of Clean Elections Texas. Both organizations oppose this nomination for all the reasons that have already been cited today. I'm personally reminded of a number of cliches that apply to what's been going on for the last 2 weeks. Garbage in, garbage out. Never compare apples to oranges. Caesar's wife should be above approach, and yelling fire in a crowded theater should always be considered a crime. Mr. Jones was not able to be here today. He's an attorney in Dallas, but he does want to make it clear that he feels, and his organization, Clean Elections, feels this amounts to either an intentional discriminatory act of voter suppression or a reckless disregard of the duties of the office. It is apparent that although this misleading and accurate disclosure was released with much fanfare and pre-arranged coordinated publicity Thirdly, the incidence of non-citizen voting is practically non-existent, and that's what I want to bear down on. It is practically non-existent, as is the case with most voter fraud. There's been some good critique before this committee today about the fundamental problems of our election process, but it is not voter fraud, and it is not non-citizens voting. This is another example, another unfortunate example of people hastily raising concern such that in my own community in Fort Worth, there will be a 3-hour public meeting discussing this red herring on Saturday afternoon, orchestrated by an organization that I've worked with, known to be a right-wing organization. I agree with them on some issues, but not on the voter suppression that we're seeing from this nominee. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, any questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes, Senator Alvarado?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Garibay, can you share with us, I know you alluded to it a bit ago, you went through, became a citizen, and can you just tell us what that felt like to be on a list that is accusing you, potentially, of voter fraud?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Alvarado. As my sister shared, we take voting very seriously. It's something very important. It's a powerful tool to make our voice heard. And when I was notified by the Travis County Registrar's Office that I was on the list, I felt very mad because I was basically trampling over my rights as a U.S. citizen. I felt sad because I know this happened because I'm a Latina, because I'm foreign-born. Even though I'm now a U.S. citizen, and it's unacceptable.
Can you tell me what the notice said, what you were required to do?
So I actually emailed the Travis County Registrar's Office because I wanted to know if I was on the list. I received a call on Wednesday when they told me, yes, you're on the list. And I think I understand that the voter registrar's office are trying to figure out what to do with this debacle. And trying to do the investigations that they need to do. But the frustrating part was that during that call, the person kept on saying, we're investigating everything, but there was no clarity on what is the process. There was no clarity on what was happening. I kept on asking, are you notifying me now that I need to send something? She kept on saying, we're going to investigate. And then when I asked, I want all this in writing. She said, I'll do that. But there was no clarity on, like, yes, this is your notification. Yes, you have 30 days. You'll be taking out the role or not. And so I think it is a shame of what happened. And it's a shame that the state did not take due diligence to know exactly what was going to happen if someone was on the list, how, when, and where. And it's also, it sucks for the registrar's office that they're trying to figure out what to do, what's right, what's wrong, what questions do they ask. And it just shows that there was no due diligence.
And that's the concern that some of us have raised in the earlier questions that we asked, is that when you just negligently release something without double checking the work of, thousands of names, and when it may be perceived as accusing people of doing something, and you're notified that you're on a list, and you immediately want to correct it, and burden is put on you to prove your citizenship. I remember a point in time when people were on a list. I appreciate you being here. I know it probably took a lot for you to come here and to tell us what you felt getting this notice and having to prove that you were in the right to have a voter registration and to be on the voter registration rolls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Additional question? Mm-hmm. Senator Hall?
Mr. Burnham, in your rapid close there, you made a rather strong statement that there's no voter fraud in Texas. Do you really believe that, or was that a misstatement?
That was a misstatement. It's virtually non-existent, and the issue that keeps being exploited is one that's really intended to do voter suppression. The real problem is in the appropriators and the implementation of the law.
It was a yes or no question.
Oh, well, I took advantage of it.
He did this for a while. He knows how to do it.
Members, additional questions for this panel? All right, seeing none, thank you all for coming to your state capitol to testify. Next panel up, Gail Johnson, Matt Long, Jacob Arnowitz. Some of y'all should be doctors. I say that with love. Alejandra Oliveira. That one may not be. And I know we have additional people coming into the room. If you do wish to testify on for or against Mr. Whitley's confirmation, the forms are on the back table, and you can give them to the young gentleman up here at the front. We'll start with Gail Johnson. Nope, nope. Okay, we'll work in this way then. Mr. Long?
Yes.
When you're settled, I'll let you begin.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Matt Long, and I'm here speaking on behalf of myself and in favor of the nomination of David Whitley to the Secretary of State. Our Governor Abbott has taken a really strong public statement on voter fraud and election fraud, and even has quite a few good bills, election integrity bills that have his signature on them. I trust the governor and I trust his nomination, and after hearing Secretary Whitley today in his testimony earlier, I'm even more convinced that his nomination is appropriate. His concern for the accuracy of voter rolls is very, very important. And in Fredericksburg, we do our citizens' duty by watching polls. And I train people and work with candidates who ask me to help them train poll watchers. And so we get poll watchers up to the polls, and we do our part. And we're very happy to have the backing of the Secretary of State. And we've actually called them during elections several times, and they've answered questions for us. And we need to know that that is true. One of the things I tell our poll watchers, and something I've been hearing here today, and this is important, is that it is almost impossible to leave a Texas polling station and not having cast at least a provisional ballot. It is almost impossible. All these talks of lists and this list and that list and this number and that number and letters being sent out, it is almost impossible to go into a Texas polling station and not vote. And so all of these concerns, at the end of the day, we're all concerned about the integrity of the vote, and does our vote count? And yes, and sometimes we have to jump through hoops, and usually the cause behind that is the government, because the government just doesn't do many things very well, including this. Talk to anybody who's on Social Security or any of our vets, and they'll tell you, you fill out a form with the wrong letter, and you're going to get this notice and that notice and another notice. At the end of the day, my vote is so important to me that if I got a letter that said you got to walk through a den of lions to get to the polling station, I would do so.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Jacob Arnowitz?
Hello, my name is Jacob Aronowitz. I am the field director for Mike Siegel for Congress. You heard from him earlier. I'd like to thank the Assembled Nominations Committee, and I must urge that you oppose and vote against the nomination of Mr. David Whitley for the Secretary of State. There was some discussion, I believe it was a senator sitting on the far side there who brought up, well, why didn't Whitley just vet the list with the counties before moving to action and referring it to the Attorney General and sending this advisory that demanded action of the counties? It's really unclear to me, because if you read the advisory, it says that naturalization is an acceptable proof that someone is actually eligible. So it seems that Whitley and his office and the AG that they consulted knew full and well that naturalization would be something that would make somebody eligible. And there's only two reasonable conclusions: that they did not want to conduct that cross-check because they wanted to produce a more headline-grabbing and larger number of potentially ineligible persons, or that Mr. Whitley and his office are wildly incompetent. Mr. Whitley testified that he didn't know what a Code 64 was. He didn't understand the DPS process for retaining that data. He testified repeatedly that he wasn't a data person. I think he said that someone who's not a data person maybe shouldn't put out press releases that suggest people will be prosecuted for illegal actions. Maybe if he's not a data person, he should consult some data people at the county, because it was obvious from his own advisory that he knew, or someone that he talked to knew, that there were going to be naturalized people on that list, and they released it anyway, and they referred it to the AG. Or maybe they didn't do that cross-check, and they didn't know because they don't really understand state government well enough to serve this state as the Secretary of State. Those are the only two reasonable conclusions to be drawn from the way that the advisory is structured and the way that the press release was rolled out. Those are both disqualifying scenarios, and he should be rejected.
Thank you. Ms. Olvera?
Alejandra, yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair Buckingham, members of the committee. Good morning and good afternoon, I don't know. It's the afternoon already, yeah. My name is Alejandra Olvera, and I'm a member of Workings Defense. I am here to testify to ask you to oppose confirmation of Grady Whitley for the office of Secretary of State. My family, my happiness, my everything. My son Carlos Chavez is 19 years old. I am so proud of him. Last year, he was very excited because he registered to vote an event with legendary Dolores Huerta. Imagine that. He volunteered in campaigns, and he was ready to exercise his right to vote. He felt like he made a difference. He was proud. Until we received a letter in the mail from the country to let him know he was under investigation. My 19-year-old son, we saw the news, but never thought he would be in the list. After reading the letter, he said to me he was scared. I wasn't going to vote again. He told me he's not going to do it again. And I told him, no, hijo, nos quieren asustar. They want to scare us. This is the reason why I'm here, because I'm devastated that Carlos will say that to me. I am angry, and our community continues to be targeted. This tactic to intimidate us community, and this is unacceptable. Thank you, and I ask you on behalf of my son Carlos Chavez and many other people you hear from today to oppose the confirmation of Gregory D. Whitley for the office of Secretary of State.
Thank you for your testimony. And we had called Gail Johnson. Did she? Oh, yes, ma'am. Come on up. It's hard with people moving in and out sometimes. So.
Thank you, Senators. And everybody who's involved in this important process. I really appreciate your service to our state and to our voters. I am Gail Johnson. I'm from Lytle, Texas, a small town south of San Antonio. My husband and I both volunteer to sit on elections. I used to be the judge. Now I'm demoted to the clerk, or maybe that's a promotion, and he sits as a judge in whatever polling location they need us in our county. I had to leave earlier and I came back, but Senator Watson was questioning, and the question was drilling down on just what these folks are talking about now. And I wanted to just address the immediacy of the conversation that you had. Sitting on an election, we depend on our Secretary of State. We depend through our county elections administrator. There are that many, 254 counties here in Texas. I don't know how qualified and how well staffed all of these areas are throughout our state, all of the counties. I do know that it requires a lot of training and a lot of knowledge to run an election and to sit on an election. And I personally am for this denomination and for providing him as our new Secretary of State. I think he's intelligent. From what I heard this morning, I think he's dedicated to the citizens of this state. I know sitting on election, we provide every means possible for people who come in our doors to vote. We provide limited ballots. We provide regular ballots. We provide whatever help they need. We provide nonpartisan help to whomever comes in to vote. I know that they have the privilege to vote if they really want to.
Thank you for your testimony. I think Senator Miles, you're first.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there's some young people in the audience. Can they identify themselves? It's like a group that you know who they are. Yeah.
Sure.
Who y'all with?
Texas A&M University System, Chancellor Student Advisory Board.
Welcome to the Capitol.
Right. Yeah. We're glad to have y'all.
You're at a very important time right now.
Senator Miles, any other questions for the panel? Senator Hall?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Long.
Yes.
You made a statement near the end of your closing that really rang a bell with the reality, and so did you, ma'am. And I've been an election judge. I've worked the polls. I've been there. I have never, ever seen anyone that came in to vote that was turned away. That people can show up with an expired driver's license from another state, and with all the rules we have of a reasonable impediment, you can have no identification and still vote there. So have you ever seen anybody actually turned away from a poll?
Absolutely not, and we've been poll watching and training people to poll watch, and I even have I keep and collect all their notes, and I hear weird stories, and yet every single time they cast a vote, and then you have that amount of time to straighten everything out, and it's impossible to not vote in Texas.
And I agree that we need to be accurate in what we do in the process and so on. But we also have to make sure we don't lose sight of the end product, the end objective. And no one should be disenfranchised from voting. And I don't think I've seen it, but everyone has to understand that your vote that is cast legally can be disenfranchised by one other vote from someone who should not be voting. But we really don't have any filter that stops anyone from who shows up at the poll and wants to vote. At least I haven't seen them. It sounds like you've seen the same thing in a different part of the state.
No, sir, I've never seen an example of it. In fact, I tell my poll watchers the biggest thing they need to be concerned about is if someone is turned away, that should be the biggest red flag, that if someone actually comes in and they walk out without casting a ballot, you need to go to the judge right then and find out why that person didn't cast a ballot. And so I tell my people that's the biggest red flag to watch for.
Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Senator Watson?
I feel the need to at least make a statement, particularly now that Senator Hall has declared that nobody ever didn't get to vote. We live in a state that has a pretty strong history of people being denied the opportunity to vote. And while your experience and the senator's experience may be that no one has ever been turned away, that certainly hadn't been universal in the history of our state, and is not your experience is probably not universal even today. In fact, we hear every election cycle of situations where it's not universal. That being said, I also happen to firmly believe, and I hope you will agree with me, that a citizen of the state of Texas that is lawfully registered to vote shouldn't have to go through additional hoops. They ought to not have to cast a provisional ballot if they have been lawfully registered to vote and are citizens of this state. They shouldn't have to do additional things to prove their citizenship simply because of some effort made by the Secretary of State's office that creates additional burdens. And then I would finally say that I appreciate very much the two of y'all coming to testify, and I appreciate very much the service of Senator Hall. But as I sit here, as you sit there, next to this young woman who tells you about how people can be fearful, citizens lawfully registered to vote can be fearful of actually then going, whether they're going to be turned away or not, but going to vote because the government issues a statement that you're under investigation. Even if that is somehow cured, that fear and that intimidation will keep them from voting. And that is also part of the stained history of our state when it comes to people of color being allowed to vote. So I feel it's very important that we not lose sight of all aspects of this simply because of some limited experience that nobody they know has ever been turned away. I appreciate greatly, though, your being here and testifying. And like I say, I appreciate Senator Hall's service. Thank you all.
No public demonstrations, please. Other questions for this panel, senators? Okay, thank you all for your testimony and for coming to your state capitol. Next up is Kent Johnson, Samantha Robles, Alice Yee, Adam Kahn. Do we have Kent Johnson? Samantha, right here. Okay. Yes, ma'am, when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Samantha Robles. I'm the Advocacy Director for Progress Texas. I'm here in opposition to the nomination that we're hearing today for Secretary of State. I'm not going to go through what we've already discussed at length this morning, but I think what we can say in the very short time that Whitley has been holding this office, he has shown that he is unfit to hold the highest position of election protection in our state. We know that the list that he has issued was incorrect. We also know that he isn't sure if he checked the data before the release, and he did not go back and send out a statement that would retract or show the right information. If we take a look, let's take a look back. Texas has a long-standing history of creating barriers to voting in this state. Texas has eliminated some of the most important pieces of the Voting Rights Act. We have also eliminated ways that people can vote, show up to vote, eliminated voter ID that impacts people from rural communities to big cities, and our college students. It incredibly impacts people who may not have the means to go get a new ID. Now, when we take a look at what's happened in the last month, our biggest concern is the voters. What is going to happen to the voters who received a letter? What's going to happen to the voters that are on that list who do not receive a letter, right? What can they do if they're not able to get back to the state in 30 days? That is our biggest concern, and I think this committee can start in addressing this issue and addressing the failures of the Secretary of State by voting no on his nomination. You can start by voting no. Earlier this year, I think we heard lawmakers say, like, let's really get down to business. Let's stop these controversies and get down to business, and this is where it starts. Saying no on a nominee who has created a mess of our state, voters on and off this list are watching. They are watching, and while the Secretary of State's office may not be an elected position, y'all's are. Let's get to work. Let's say no to this nominee, and let's find a nominee that will address this mess and vote, and that will protect our voters. Thank you.
Alice Yee, going once, going twice. Okay. Mr. Khan?
Hi. Adam Kahn, testifying in favor of Secretary Whitley's nomination, although to begin with, I actually want to start in a point of agreement with Senator Watson, because I definitely agree with you that for the 100 years that the Democrats controlled this state, access to the polls on behalf of minority communities was a big issue. Beyond that, I think Secretary Whitley has demonstrated a willingness to take on tough issues and not back down in the face of fairly significant opposition. So I think that is a fairly big plus in his cap. Now, obviously, in some of the recent controversies, there have been disputes over some of the numbers and the extent of the problem. Now, obviously, I would never accuse my Democratic friends of laying the foundation for future litigation. However, even if the numbers are lower than we suspect, I think only a fool would say that the voter rolls in this state are truly where they should be. Now, Senator Buckingham, Senator Watson, Senator Campbell, you all represent Travis County. I'm a Travis County resident. Elections in Travis County are routinely decided by fewer than 5,000 votes. I don't think that anyone, even in the most hostile to the Secretary of State's numbers, is denying that there could be 5,000 problematic votes. Derek Ryan, the election data specialist, put out a list, I think it was about a week ago, detailing races all around the state that were decided by 5,000, 4,000, fewer than that votes. And so the idea that elections can't be affected by small numbers is just not borne out by reality.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Members, questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you all so much. Okay, we have Craig Cosgray and Domingo Garcias. And then, is that, okay. If there's anyone else in the room, just to give y'all a little notice, who wants to testify on for or against David Whitley's confirmation, the forms are in the back. So, these are our last two public testimony listed. We'll start with Mr. Cosgray.
Hi, Senator Buckingham. Thanks for letting me speak today. Thank you, Senators. Appreciate it. My name's Craig Cosgray. I live in Burnett County. I'm retired. I used to be a pilot in the Air Force and with Delta, and I own a movie company called Marengo Films. We manufacture classic movies on DVD. Feel free to hit our website. Let me just say this. One of the things I did for Burnett County, and I still do, I've been a poll watcher for the last 3 out of 4 years. I promise you, everyone in Burnett County's an honest county, and everybody there gets to vote. My daughter's a Latino. She's Mexican American, and so it did bother me hearing some of the testimony today. I promise you that in the U.S. Air Force and at Delta Airlines, where I used to work, and in Burnett County, there's no nonsense going on there, and so please take some of the things you hear with a grain of salt. I have to ask a question. Are driver's licenses issued in the state of Texas to non-citizens? Is there a notification on those driver's license that those people are non-citizens?
No, but if you are here on a temporary visa of some sort, it's shown as a temporary license. If you are here as a permanent resident, then it's the same license that a citizen gets.
Okay, really what I'm getting at today is not really some sort of conspiracy going on by the Republicans or anybody else. I'm actually a Tea Party person. I'm here to support the nominee for the Secretary of State because it appears to me that what he's inherited is basically a chaotic system. I don't know who set that system up, but it seems to me notification should be on the driver's license, and that would eliminate a heck of a lot of procedural errors that are going on. And I want to say to my new fellow Americans in the room, welcome to the United States of America and their bureaucracy. Because if you think you have problems now, wait till the IRS hits you and everybody else down the road. I promise you that most of us are thrilled you're here. I want to remind everyone that there was an election fraud issue that was identified by Dr. Laura Presley in a voter fraud, and she won her case. Hill and Hayes County have both lost 1,000 votes in the 2016 election. So I'm running out of time here. I just want to say this. I think one of the things we can do is take a good hard look at the Director of Elections operation, and maybe we can clarify some of this bureaucratic nonsense and everybody get to vote. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
How do you say your last name?
Garcia?
Okay, it is good. Again, you should be a
Domingo Garcia.
Yes, sir.
She's making
Please
fun of
go.
your handwriting.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I write back.
I thought it was maybe a cue. Please, sorry.
Okay. My name is Domingo Garcia. I'm the national president of LULAC. LULAC was founded in 1929. It's the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the United States and the largest. And we were founded to fight Jim Crow laws. LULAC was the lead plaintiff to stop the poll tax. People had to pay to vote. LULAC was the lead plaintiff against the whites-only primary when Democrats controlled and only whites could vote in the primaries. LULAC was the lead when we started fighting against the gerrymandering. It was LULAC versus the state of Texas, or actually Perry, to stop the gerrymandering of districts in order to disenfranchise Latino voters. And last Tuesday, LULAC was unfortunately again the lead LULAC plaintiff to challenge the state of Texas over the purging of 98,000 U.S. citizens, in our opinion. Julieta Garibay, who just spoke earlier, used to work for me. She's a U.S. citizen. Okay, we had a reporter from the Dallas Morning News who was a citizen. The methodology was flawed, and I'm opposed to Secretary of State because I heard his testimony. Somebody who makes a mistake, especially for the position of Secretary of State that protects the voting rights, should be own up and say, you know what, we made a mistake. We're going to withdraw that order, that directive to the elections officials, and we're going to do it right. He chose not to. He told Royce West he didn't know what voter suppression was. When somebody is not willing to own up to the responsibilities and duties as Secretary of State for the great state of Texas, then there is an issue, and I think that U.S. senators have to be the custodians of the fate of Texas voters, and he has failed that test. He failed that test when he sent out a press release at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday and dumped it. He failed that test when he knew the problems on Monday, after the lawsuit on Tuesday, and he still hasn't withdrawn it. That's fundamentally wrong, and you disenfranchise thousands of people, of citizens, who have, most of them are naturalized. Think about that. They know questions you cannot answer here on this panel, regarding the flag and the Constitution, and they really proud to become voters. We at LULAC register them at naturalization ceremonies, and therefore I think we have an obligation to protect those rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions?
Not a question. I just
No. I'll have
I
you
wanted
spell.
to just congratulate Domingo Garcia, who recently was elected. As many of you know, Domingo served in the Texas House of Representatives. So I also wanted to thank you for your service. And although you're not here in the Capitol, you are still very visible in the community, and look forward to many great things in your new leadership, your national role now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Any questions, members?
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to offer testimony on, for, and against any of the nominations that were posted on the agenda today? If not, public testimony is closed. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, thank you for holding the confirmation hearing. It's clear that improvements can be gained in the process, and I'm confident that Secretary Whitley is determined to make those improvements. I believe he is able to perform his duties and ask that he be confirmed. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator. Members, we will not be taking a vote on these nominees today. Their nominations will be left pending before the committee for at least a week. At our next hearing on February 14th, I'll be asking for a vote. Any questions or comments?
Yes, I want to say thank you to all of the people that came out to testify, and I want to say thank you to the chair on the conduct of your first meeting as chair of this committee, and you hear he's asking can we clap for that? But the openness and the allowing a full hearing is very important on these nominees, and at your first hearing to have this important of a nominee and this many people. Thank you very much for the way you conducted the hearing.
Thank you all.
Madam Chair, I would agree as well. I know that sometimes we're dealing with very difficult issues, but the manner in which you conducted yourself as chair and making everyone despite what their position was, to feel welcome and very accommodating to our guests. I applaud that.
Thank you, Senator.
And I got to chime in, Madam Chair. Job well done.
Thank you. Y'all are very kind, great committee, and a wonderful team.
Me too. Did a good job.
I never thought I'd see you in the Me Too. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, is there any business to come before the committee? With no other business to come before the committee, and upon a motion by Senator Watson, the committee stands recessed, subject to the chair. Thank you.